Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me again at the old computer shack. I keep forgetting to mention, but I've got a shitty Discord channel and a Matrix server linked to it. If you look down in the thing where stuff is, you can find a link to that and other media social thingaroos. The Discord in particular is out of control and super toxic, and I'm too much of a wuss to do anything about it. But you, dear viewer, can help by joining the Discord and acting like a normal, reasonably sane person and bringing some sanity to the circus. So you should do that, and we can hang out and talk about old computers and ham radio and all that shit. Anyway, I digress, I suppose. This is the QBone. We mentioned it a little bit in a previous video. This is a QBus card, a quad height QBus card, that can emulate pretty much or as little of a QBus PDP-11 as you want. Last time I checked, it wouldn't do Ethernet, but other than that, it'll emulate memory and hard drives and floppy drives and serial ports, and I think it'll even emulate CPUs. It does this by interfacing a BeagleBone Black to the QBus, and then you set up the software by plugging the BeagleBone into your LAN and logging into it and changing configuration files and stuff. So the main reason I wanted this was for floppy drive emulation, but I think it'll also be useful for helping test all those QBus cards that we looked at in the last video. And I bought this as a kit. It comes from Georg or George, I'm not sure, Hope. He's a very German fellow, perhaps one of the most German fellows that I've ever interacted with. That's a compliment. But I'm just a dumb American, so I can't pronounce your name right, buddy. But yeah, it's a really cool product. It's a little bit expensive for what it is, but it's pretty damn useful for what it is too. It uses a couple of CPLDs, some old school PDP-11 bus driver chips to make everything work happy with the QBus, and just interfaces the BeagleBone to it like that. So in the rest of this video, we're going to go backwards in time, and I'm going to have like a sped up thing of the assembly of this, because yeah, like I said, I bought this as a kit. I soldered it together, but I just wanted to say that I made some mistakes during the assembly. Most importantly, when you watch the assembly, I will first install these resistor packs up here in the wrong place. Don't do that if you're following along, assembling your own while this video plays. I also struggled a little bit installing these offset doohickeys that keep the QBone from sticking up too far and hitting cards that are installed on top of it. There's a particular procedure detailed in the assembly manual. It's not a very detailed manual, but that part is very detailed, and it has you just lining things up and soldering straight through the holes. And I decided I didn't trust myself enough to do that. I wanted to put actual like pin headers through here. So that's what I did, and it took me a couple of tries to figure out the right procedure to do that painlessly. So I'm going to cut out the parts where I struggled and only leave the parts that worked right. And for those parts, I'll probably stop the slowdown and run it at normal speed so you can follow along for that. And then we'll speed it back up again and finish, because most of the assembly is very, very easy. It's all through-hole stuff. All the surface mount shit comes already soldered to the board. It's just this stuff here was a little bit challenging to figure out how to do right. It wasn't hard once I figured out a good method, but I was dumb at first. Anyway, without further ado, so that YouTube doesn't hit me with a copyright strike, I guess I will put some of my own crappy musical recordings over top of the sped up video. I'm not much of a musician, so, you know, laugh to yourselves as you watch. Alright, cool, here we go. Got my resolution fixed. sorry the rest of the video will be so fuzzy, but so this is out of time. This is the last thing that I've recorded, but I'm putting it earlier in the video. There are a couple of gotchas that aren't immediately obvious from reading the assembly instructions. First, these resistor packs down here. There's a 10K resistor pack that goes here, and there's a 330 ohm resistor pack that goes here, and they're both black, and they look the same, but they have different values. All right, and these resistor packs, these kind of resistor packs anyway, they're on the side with the dot on it. That'll be this side. The way these plug into here, that's the common pin, and then there are a bunch of resistors inside of the resistor pack, like this. All right. How many ever other pins there are? So what you'll need to do, if you can't tell which one is which, is you'll need to take your ohm meter and put it across the leftmost pin, alright, the pin with the dot on it, and any one of these other pins, and then you'll either read 10K or 330 ohms or something close to it. And when you measure across these two pins, you should read double that resistance. If you read nothing in between these two pins, then you've got an isolated resistor pack, which is what all the rest of these are, these wide ones here. All right, these two up here and these two red ones here. And it appears in I found some later assembly instructions, and it appears that in later versions of this board they replace these isolated resistor packs with just jumper wires. So I don't know what that means as far as assembly, but the way that those isolated resistor packs work is they're like this, and all of the resistors inside of the pack are separate, right? So yeah, and then this machined header up here, I haven't soldered it in yet. I wasn't sure exactly what the purpose of this was. This you solder this in here, and then you're supposed to put jumpers between each pair of pins on this. I'm not sure why that is. I haven't found a schematic for this board anywhere, and I haven't gone to the trouble of trying to trace stuff to figure out what the purpose of this is. But I'm not sure why they included a machined pin header for this. I think I'm just going to put in a regular pin header and put jumpers over it, you know what I'm saying? Instead of the picture shows these pins soldered together on this header. I don't know why that is. I think that covers all of the funny business that wasn't obvious to me at first. I mean, maybe that's obvious to the rest of you and I'm just too dumb, I don't know. But anyway, on with the video. Good luck with your assembly if you're watching this and assembling your own at the same time.
just a poor wayfaring stranger, traveling through this world of woe. But there's no sickness, no toil nor danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm just a going over Jordan. I'm just a going.
I guess that means we're down to attaching the beagle bone. And this is a little bit of a funny business here. I already did one side because I was trying to figure out the best way to do this. So the deal is the beagle bone's kind of tall, so it's got to be recessed down into the board a little bit so that stuff that's on top of this card doesn't hit the back of it here. So the way they do that is they have these things here that you solder together that plug into the beagle bone, and then those solder onto this header thing here really flat, and the thing sits there like that. The way that he shows on the instructions is to just lay this part together and solder through these holes, but I don't think that's going to work very well. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. Let me show you how I assembled this other side. This is kind of a pain in the ass. So we've got our little thingaroos, and it doesn't matter which way these go, I don't think, looking at the traces on them. You've got to use the beagle bone as a soldering form. You've got to plug your headers down into here and then solder this onto it. So you can get the length right on this when you trim it, alright? But you can't put both of them in here at the same time because there's only room to trim one at a time, so you've got to solder one on and trim it and everything, and then do the other one. So I'm going to start by putting this thing down into the beagle bone connector as far as it'll go, alright? And now I'm going to do an initial trimming on this thing. I'm going to cut this, I'm going to flush cut it right below this plastic here, right below this plastic here, right like that, alright? And I'm going to keep my fingers on the top of this, pushing down on it as I go to make sure that the force of snipping these doesn't pull adjacent pins up out of this connector. So we want them in there as far as they'll go, right? So I'm going to just go ahead and clip these off one at a time. As soon as we get this off of here, now this is just trash, I'm going to take my thing here and I'm going to put it down over these pins that I just cut off, right? And there's a little bit sticking up out of the top here, alright, of those pins. And I'm going to flush cut 3 of them before I solder it, one on each end and one about the middle. And these little pieces fly off of here really hard, so I'm going to do it over top of a trash can after I do the initial one, so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to do it all over a trash can so that I don't have pieces all over the place. So I'm taking my flush cutters and I'm going to one end pin here, and I'm pushing down with the flush cutters down this way, right, to make sure that I've taken up all of the slop in there, and then I'm cutting the top of that pin off flush with this little tiny piece of green PC board, right like that. Alright, now you can see that one that I just cut off flush there. Alright, and I'm going to do that on this end here, and I'm going to do it to one about the middle here. And I'm going to push down on this PC board while I solder one of these that I flush cut. making sure I keep all the slack up out of it. And you want to heat both the stub of the pin and the pad, and it doesn't take a whole lot of solder. That, and then I'm going to push down on this board and heat it up again. Make sure I've got all the slack out right there. Alright? Then I'm going to come up here and do the same thing on this other end. Okay, and then I'm going to do the one in the middle. The second row is a lot easier to do because this first row will kind of hold it together. So I've got those three done, and that's enough to hold this green PC board flush down against the rest of this connector. So at this point, I'm going to go back with my flush cutters over the trash can, and I'm going to cut all of the rest of those flush with the PC board. And I'm just going to proceed to solder the rest of them. With that thing soldered on there flush like that, we want to unplug this very carefully. Very carefully. The pins aren't terribly straight, but you know, it'll do. So we'll do the same thing with the other one now, except in the other slot of the BeagleBone, of course. And then the next order of business is to mount this to this. Alright, gentlemen, after some false starts, I think I figured out the best way to attach these side pieces on. Now, I did the one off camera as I was figuring out what the hell I'm doing, and I had some stops and starts. I had this one partially attached over here, but I had it all screwed up because I was doing it wrong the first time. So I desoldered all of this side. We're going to do it right this time. I think I came up with a good way to do this. So let me show you what I'm doing to attach these. In the official directions, he has you just lining the holes up and trying to solder straight down through the holes to attach this. And I'm dubious of that plan. I've got two pieces of proto board. If you don't have proto board and you haven't soldered these things yet, you could probably use both of these in place of these two pieces of proto board, because and size your single row headers to begin with. Now these are just single row headers. They don't come in the kit. These are just ones that I have. I'm sticking the long end of the header through two pieces of perf board like this, right? And then I'm taking a hard surface. The soldering mat won't do, and I'm putting that down firmly on that hard surface, alright? And then this plastic part, you know, it comes up like that, right? And then I'm taking a tool. You could probably use a screwdriver for this too, but I'm using this IC prying tool instead. And I'm just pushing the plastic part down like so on this hard surface, and until it's down firmly against the proto board, and that leaves just enough pin below this plastic to go through two sections of PC board. Alright, now I'm going to snap off 3 sets of 2 of these to start with. Alright. Then I'm going to take my boards, and I soldered this one on without having anything attached to it. I'm going to do this one with the BeagleBone connected to all of them, because I think that'll help keep things lined up better as we're soldering. Install this one on this side, like so. Alright, now we're going to take these bits that we broke off, and we're going to insert them from the reverse side, because this is the side we want to pry on. I already scraped a little bit of the solder mask here on this side before I figured out that it was best to do that on this side. So we're just going to put that through there and take our piece of tape. What the hell did I do with our piece of tape? Here's our piece of tape. And hold that on there, temporary-like, as we flip the thing over. And then we realize that we haven't turned on our soldering station yet, so we have to wait for it to warm up. Once we have our iron heated up, I'm just going to solder. The pin is flush with this side of the board, right? I'm just going to solder on one side of that. I'm not going to do both, just the one for now. Then we'll take our next adjusted header thing and put it on the bottom. Just one of them for now. And then finally we'll take our last one, we'll just put it as close to the middle as possible. There's an even number of holes, so you can't put it right in the middle, I don't think, but as close as we can. And then we'll tape it on there and solder one of them the same way. And we'll make sure, now the purpose of this is to hold this thing on here right. So we want to make sure that it's all, the two boards are drawn up against each other well before we start soldering anything else. I'm going to push on all these again just to make sure that everything is nice and tight. We don't want any fuckery here, because once we start the next part of this, there's no going back without a desoldering gun. With that being done, we shall solder the other sides of those that we hadn't soldered yet. Now with that done, we're going to flip this thing back over again, and we're going to take a prying tool of some variety and very carefully pull the plastic up just a little bit. You don't have to pull it all the way off. We're just prying it up. See there? And then we'll take our flush cutters and we'll push this away with our flush cutters to make sure that this board here remains drawn up, that they might remain drawn up together. And we'll just flush cut these even with the board. And then we shall immediately solder that one of them in place. So then we're just going to do the same thing with these other two. But we don't want to move this plastic until we have to, because this plastic piece is what's holding this down like it's supposed to be, right? And then finally we'll do the last one the same way. There's a very imperceptible space in here now, and we need to try to draw that up somewhere, but there's no good way to squeeze on this with the beagle bone connected, so I'm going to very carefully try to take it off now, and hopefully everything will remain lined up since we got it in position with everything plugged in, right? So let's get this up here flush like it's supposed to be. Alright, that's pretty good. We'll go ahead and solder the other side of each of those. And we'll inspect it one last time and make sure that the beagle bone still lines up to plug in there. In fact, with it flush now, we can probably just reinstall the beagle bone and leave it on there for the rest of the procedure. That should ensure that we don't get off kilter too bad here. Now for the rest of those empty spaces, we'll just take our cheap pieces of pin header, and we'll break off pieces that are as long as the empty space there, and get our hard thing and our proto board again. Our 2 layers of proto board on our hard surface, and move the plastic down flush again. Alright, Alright, and then we will insert it. We do that from the back side. I don't want to make that mistake again. Tape it on there. Flip the board over and solder all of those. And we can just give it the flip. Pry the plastic up just a hair. Just enough to get the flush cutter in there. And snip that off even. And there's enough pin left here that we can put this end that we haven't cut on back down through the proto boards and push it down and reuse it on the section beside of it. But let's solder this part first. And this way we ensure that we have a good electrical connection and in my opinion a better mechanical connection as well. And there we go. And so yeah, the rest of it's exactly the same procedure. So when you're soldering these, I think it's important to heat both the pad and the pin. So we want to kind of push our iron against both of them. When you flush cut these, it'll still leave a little bit of a nub sticking up, and you want to push your iron against that nub so that you make sure you get the pin hot as well as the pad, so that the solder will stick to both of them right. Otherwise, I think it's pretty unlikely, but it's always possible that you could get a cold solder joint that way if you don't get that pin in the center hot. And you might have a really aggravating intermittent electrical connection. It's very hard to diagnose if something like that happens. So just you know, go slow. I know it's easy to get in a hurry on these projects because you want to get the son of a bitch done so you can play with it, but it's way easier to solder everything good the first time than to trace a bunch of shit for hours later only to find a shitty solder joint somewhere. So there we have the thing all done, nice and flush on the bottom. Everything's drawn up nice and pretty on the top. I mean, as pretty as a hand soldering job ever is. I think that's a good construction method. If you're a little bit leery of trying to solder straight down through those holes. Alright. Well, aside from not knowing quite what to do with this, it is done. Now, I don't have the correct power supply for this BeagleBone. I was being super cheap and I just bought the board and nothing else. But what I'm going to do is, this is the end of this video, but in the next one, I'll check the voltages on that power supply, and then we'll just put this whole card into the H11 backplane and use it to power the BeagleBone while we install the software and all that stuff. And I might as well put the SD card in there now so I don't lose it on the desk. Don't want the cat to eat it. Right, Mr. Fluffles? That's right, he says. That SD card should have the software on it already. Take a look at all this. Make sure our solder joints are all good. We need to clean all the flux off of here. Get the old brake cleaner and clean this thing off. Then we'll be done. I think we can avoid that relay anyway. There's there's only one place we soldered on top of it anyhow. About empty. Alright, we'll let that dry. It should be happy and clean. That's all my brake cleaner too. That was chlorinated brake cleaner too. I shouldn't have been using that inside. Gonna die. Okay. See you guys next time. We'll do the tests and stuff on the BeagleBone. Alright, bye.